Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Launch Codes Football. I'm Chris W.
I'm Chris P.
And I'm Chelsea, and I've been demoted to third in this listing for anyone who's wondering. This is what happens when I miss 2 weeks, but it's fine.
That's okay. Yes, just to say something, sorry we missed last week, but we're back today with episode 66. It's kind of crazy. As I've talked to people about our podcast, sometimes they're like, "You guys are 65 episodes in at that time?" I'm like, "Yeah, we've been grinding at this for a little bit."
Doesn't
Uh,
feel like it's been that many, honestly.
no. I mean, Chris, what? This is like your sixth, fifth episode at this point, so definitely not for you, I guess.
Yeah.
He's been inaugurated in. He's part of it now.
Well, guys, I hope you're all the listeners are ready because some may hate us, some may love us, but today we're ripping the zebras. And I think everyone does every week, but this week has felt especially that the boys in black and white and girls, I think they have female refs in the NFL. I actually don't remember. I know they do in
There's
the
at least
NBA.
one, I
Yes.
think.
Okay,
Yes.
cool, cool.
Girl power, represent.
So we are going to rip the refs now. So I think we should start out with the one that's been in the most news. Chelsea's own Colts in this Browns versus Colts game. So Chelsea, why don't you tell us a little bit of how Colts Nation is feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lot more toned down now with it being midweek, but
You sound
yeah, it
defeated.
it 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 it, it was pretty upsetting. I'll be honest. I mean, the two calls at the end of the game were the most noticeable, but there were other calls in this game too that aren't getting talked about really, that people still noticed as well. Specifically, the one that really just grinded my gears was the pass interference call against Daryl Baker against Amari Cooper. I think it was Amari Cooper in the end zone in the top right corner. They called it pass interference. As you can see in this picture, if you're watching us on YouTube, yes, you may notice that the ball is literally not in this picture because the pass was quite literally uncatchable. By the time the ball would have been caught, if it could have been caught, the wide receiver would have been at least 2 steps out of the end zone. Like that, it's not an argument. Like if you go back and you look at the play, you look at where the ball was, and you look at all the angles, there was no way on God's green earth that that ball was being caught. There just isn't. And the fact that they called it pass interference, but that because it was pass interference. Now don't hear me saying it wasn't pass interference. It was. Like Daryl Baker was literally only in the game because Juju Brents sustained a thigh injury. Literally all of Colts Nation hates him. Like no one likes Daryl Baker.
Yikes.
I do not feel that way. I would prefer him not play, obviously, but I don't hate him. He started out as a starting cornerback on this team for the first couple weeks and got promptly demoted. So he was a healthy scratch like a couple weeks in a row because they had other guys that were playing better than him. So the only reason he was even in this game is because someone sustained an injury, but that's beside the point. How on earth you don't call this an uncatchable ball is just beside me. If you watch the whole clip on YouTube, like look it up on NFL clips or whatever, or you watch it on Instagram or whatever, the ball literally went so far that it bounced beyond the yellow line up into the hands of someone in the stands. The stands are what? At least 6 feet above the field? Like the amount of juice you had to put on that ball for it to bounce at least 6 feet straight up in the air into the arms of a fan should be evidence enough that it's uncatchable. But somehow they didn't call it uncatchable, and the drive got extended, and inevitably they ended up scoring, and the Colts lost by 1. And that was not the only reason the Colts lost. I mean, they scored like a 70-yard rushing touchdown on the Colts' first drive of the game on like the third play. So there are reasons that the Colts caused themselves to lose this game. But it's just particularly infuriating when literally all of America can see that this ball is literally not even catchable for Megatron, and they still don't call it. because it was a pass interference. Like, they got that correct. But you can't not call uncatchable when it literally bounces outside the yellow line. Like, even with his arm outstretched, the ball was at least 2 or 3 feet above his hands. And bro is over 6 feet tall. I mean, he has a big arm span. Like, he can reach up pretty far, but it wasn't even close. So I just, that one just really got me, honestly. I'm like, how on earth you don't call that is just crazy to me. Like, I don't want games to be decided by penalties that shouldn't be called, right? Like, if it's a throw it up in the air, like it couldn't, whatever. Sure, it's debatable. But for plays that very obviously have a penalty on them, you can't not call them. Like, you have to call them. And they just didn't on this, and it was just annoying. There was a second play that was talked about after this game. It was the play right before this one. Again, if you're watching YouTube, you can see the a very elegantly circle around the Colts player touching Amari Cooper's butt cheek, which is really quite an unfortunate shot, if we're being honest. But this play was the illegal contact play, again, on Darrell Baker, who was just killing me at the end of this game, but it's fine. This one, I think, is more up for debate than the other one. The other one, I feel like, is obvious. This one, it's arguable that this one was called correctly. So for this play, just going and looking at the game for the Colts, like the Browns, they were driving down the field. I mean, they looked pretty good, blah, 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 blah. And then right at the end of the drive, there was a pass incomplete. It was actually not Peoples-Jones. It was the one before that. It was the one that was on Darrell Baker, the illegal contact, which is this picture you're looking at right here. So PJ Walker got sacked and fumbled, and the ball was recovered by Buckner, which I think is the primary reason why people are so mad about this play. Not so much at the penalty itself, but at the fact that it negated the win, basically. Like, if they hadn't called it, we recovered the fumble, like the game would have been over. Like, we would have won by 1 or 3 or how many ever points. But unfortunately, that was not the result of this call. So they called this illegal contact. So this play started on the Indianapolis 13-yard line. Now, if you watch the play on YouTube, they get down past the 10. They're inside the 10. They're like straddling the 8 to 7 yard line. Maybe the 6 yard line. It's up for debate. But there's hand fighting. There's a bunch of stuff going on. And if you watch the entire clip, Cooper makes contact with Darrell Baker first. And Darrell Baker starts to fall down. And Darrell Baker probably panics and is afraid he's going to give up a touchdown. So he unfortunately grabs Amari Cooper's butt cheek, which again is just very unfortunate. So did it impede his route? Yes. Could he have run faster if it didn't happen? Yes. But it was right on the 5 yard line of where the penalty would be called, like you have 5 yards. And Baker and Cooper were making contact with one another, and Baker fell down. So, all of that taken into consideration, I was pretty mad at that too. Less mad at the penalty, more mad that the fumble didn't count and that the recovery didn't count. So like I said earlier, I think that the other one, the uncatchable ball, I think that's not arguable. I think that should have been a call. There's an argument that it should or shouldn't. I am personally of the opinion, like I said earlier, call the plays that are obvious, right? I don't feel like this play was obvious. Like, the whole nation is debating on whether or not this was obvious. Like, call the obvious plays in the game, but don't change the outcome of a play based on a 50-50 thing like this. Like, this very easily could have not been called a penalty as easily as it was called a penalty. So that's my main problem with it. Whether or not it was actually a penalty is up for debate. My problem is, how do you call a penalty on it when it is up for debate? If it's obvious, sure. If you got Daryl Baker like hanging off his shoulders, like, okay, obviously. But if it's not obvious and it's a turnover play, how are you going to call that to negate a turnover? It baffles me. It doesn't get me as going as the other one, but I don't get it. And I will point out that Jim Irsay, notorious Jim Irsay, got on Twitter and said that the NFL admitted that they got these plays wrong. Now, did that quote come directly from the NFL? Perhaps not. But was it on Twitter? Yes. So obviously that means that they're sorry. No, just kidding. Obviously not.
It's true then.
So who knows if they actually officially said this or if someone just said it in passing. There's no telling. I mean, the NFL is never going to be like, pointing itself out, doing all kinds of crazy things like, oh yeah, we did this wrong and this and this and this. Like, they're not going to drag their own reputation down. But Jim Irsay did tweet it, so take from that what you will. And Pat McAfee got on the Pat McAfee show and absolutely ripped the NFL, which I was grateful for. So, all of that to be considered, this was quite an annoying game. But these are not the reasons the Colts lost this game. Myles Garrett literally dominated our offense into the ground. I don't think I have ever seen a more dominant defensive performance against my team in my whole life, maybe, than this game. It was crazy. I mean, they scored a defensive touchdown. We gave up a very easy touchdown on the first drive. I mean, so there were a lot of reasons that we didn't win this game. So don't hear me saying, oh, we lost that game because of the refs, because you don't lose a game based on one play. But the outcome of a game can be heavily swayed by one play or two plays in this instance. And that's more of the way that I'm leaning with this. It's just, I don't know how you don't make the calls and how you do make the call when you're not even sure if it's the right call. Like, I don't know what you guys think about that. I mean, are you in agreement with that or no?
So, I mean, yeah, I agree with you that the first one is kind of up for debate. It's hard for that one. But definitely, yeah, the second penalty, I think it's pretty, I mean, that's pretty bad.
The second one being the uncatchable ball.
Yes, the second penalty at the very end. Yes, the uncatchable ball. I think that was just, yeah, because I just don't see Donovan Peoples-Jones having a shot at this. I mean, some say he was holding
because it was him, not Cooper. That's my bad.
It is interesting because, well, here's what I think is that I think part of fan frustration comes from the fact that we don't get any reason of why the ref called what they do. If a player messes up, the media goes to their face, shoves a microphone in it or 50 microphones in it and says, what happened on that play? And while it may be dumb or whatever, we at least understand, okay, we know what happened. Sometimes we still come out more confused. For example, why the Giants ran the ball with Saquon with no time left in the first half against the Bills on Sunday Night Football. Me and Chris were talking about that earlier, how that was just a coaching mistake because then the coach said, oh, I didn't mean to call that. I didn't call that. I called a pass play. But I'm like, you're Tyrod Taylor's not a rookie. It's not like he just called the wrong play or did that on purpose. So that's weird. So sometimes I guess we leave more confused. But I think the confusing part is the fact that we have the broadcast people, the two people in the booth saying, I don't see how that's a call. I don't see how you call that. And then they bring people like Gene Steratore, who an old ref, who says, yeah, half the time he's either like, yeah, I think that's a penalty. I see where it's coming from. Or he's like, no, it's not. So when there are those times where he says, no, I don't think it's a penalty, I think all it does is create more confusion and frustration. So that, honestly, that's kind of my thoughts on it, is that we have no idea why or what the reasoning was. And they have an NFL like officiating Twitter page that every once in a while they will say something, but they just don't. And I don't really, I mean, I know America would not react well to it. Being a ref is the most thankless job in America, I'm convinced, actually. Like, no one says, what did they say on Pat McAfee's show? No one goes to a game and says, man, I hope the refs call or have a good game today. Like, nobody does that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's
And I agree with that. I mean, it would be nice if we had some accountability because there have just been some really bad calls. I mean, worse calls than this that I've seen in my life. Worse than this. It's like reminds me of baseball. Like people rip baseball refs and umpires all the time, but they don't have any accountability either. There's an account on Twitter that posts the accuracy of the missed balls and strikes that a ref calls. And it does all these crazy calculations. It's like an algorithm. And then it spits out how many or what percentage or what decimal point of runs that would equal if they were called correctly, right? Because more often than not, they make bad calls in big spots. That's just the reality of the sport when you have a human looking at a square that's invisible, right? But I have seen posts on that Twitter where they've been like a run and a half was given to them because of 2 calls. Like, I feel like you could say the same thing is true for football. Like, a field goal might be given to someone because of 1 bad call. A touchdown might be. So, I mean, I feel like you can argue that in football as well. And I mean, just as a concluding point, these weren't the only missed calls against the against the Colts in not going in the Colts' favor. There was an illegal formation that the Browns were running with 10 seconds left in the first half that was not called. The clock was running, so if it had been called, it would have run out the clock and the half would have ended. But instead, they got a field goal. So it's not to say that it's only these 2 penalties. And I will preface this post about this. It does have a picture and it does look illegal, but it's from Reddit. So put as much stock in that as you want. But it's not just these 2 calls. These are the ones that the nation noticed, but there are other ones as well that just went unnoticed. And I'm sure there were against the Colts too. Like, I don't think that the Colts were just out there like prancing around being perfect. Like, they missed calls for everyone. Like, I get that. That's the reality of having humans umpiring the sport.
mm-hmm.
But in the biggest moments, when you have the ability to review a call with other referees, you have to get those right in the biggest moments. I get if you don't get all of them during the game because there's a lot going on. And I can't imagine being a ref. They're doing like 37 things at once. It's hard. But in the moments that are the biggest, you got to be able to do it right. I just don't understand why there isn't some more accountability. And we'll get into other games too. This isn't the only game this week that had really bad penalties. Chris P is going to get on here and talk about the game of the Dolphins versus the Eagles. Like, that game was bad too. So it's not just this game. It just makes you wonder if the NFL's ever going to do anything about it. Probably not. But I mean, NFL fans are just dreaming of the day that, you know, refs can get and umpires and, you know, all the zebras can get suspended for missed plays. Just makes me think back to that Twitter page of the runs added from missed plays. You could so do something like that for football. You could so make an equation for that. And I feel like it would just really make it painfully obvious how bad some of these calls and how bad some of the missed calls are as well.
Yeah, I think so. Chris, do you have any quick thoughts on that play, or on these couple plays?
I never watched the game, to be honest. So I don't, from the pictures and from seeing some of these clips, I mean, I can say my 2 cents as to what it is, but honestly, I don't right now since I didn't watch the full game. And that's something that, like, I feel like I have more accountability in if I did watch the full game, saw how it actually happened and everything like that. It looks pretty bad on these calls, seeing these pictures and seeing the outrage of that, this bad reffing.
Okay.
But I will say at least they had penalties.
Hey, I'm in the same boat though. That's why you're carrying this
And then-
Dolphins Eagles section, because I'm going to be honest, listener, I fell asleep in the third quarter of this game and I completely missed everything that happened. So
Oh my God.
because of that, take it away, Chris.
Yeah, what a transition we've got here.
Yeah. So yeah, the Eagles versus Miami game, late into the evening. It was going to be a high anticipated game since it's two great offenses meeting together. Jalen Hurts going against Tua. Now, it first was starting out like a good game. The Eagles seemed to be dominant coming out on the first and second quarter. The Dolphins look a little shook for a little bit. Tyreek did well in catching, except one play that he could have gotten a touchdown, which he dropped. Reminds me of the Chiefs when, I don't know, the ball hits his helmets and it goes through his hands, hits his helmets, and reminds me of that. So PTSD from that. But
I'm sorry for your pain.
And I know this is something that if you're watching on YouTube, I know this is a terrible image. It is, the quality of this is terrible. And I'm kind of going backwards in the game, so stay with me. So at the end of the game, near the end of the game, they're down by 2 scores. They need a score really fast. They need, and then do an onside kick afterwards. So their goal was to get a touchdown and then onside kick it. Now, Mostert runs out. If you watch any video, Mostert on the right side runs out straight into the corner. It was like a little wheel route ish that went straight to the corner, being followed. And on here, he's being followed by a defensive back. And as Mostert is turning around to receive the ball, the defender is actually staring ahead, not looking back. And yes, I know it was an underthrown, and Darius Slay intercepted it. But instantly, when you see a offensive player reach back and defensive player his back is turned with his arm in front of Mostert and hitting him full on, because with this impact, it did push Mostert down. It should have been a PI on the first yard line. Now, Eagles fans saying, "Oh well, that wasn't a PI. It was a pick." Well, the thing is, home dude didn't go for the ball. He was just trying to mirror and run over Mostert. That should have instantly been a flag, right? And this was before the ball was caught by Slay, because Mostert is turning around. So that's one play that I personally believe that should have been PI, which would have changed the tide of the game and the impact of the game. But yet again, as Chelsea says, the Dolphins should have played well. They didn't show up. And this is what resulted near the end of the fourth quarter. Now, the second play, this was during the fourth quarter still. This was I believe, on the 10 to 15 line of scoring in the end zone. So they're needing a crucial this is third down, I believe. And this is like a little hook route, I believe. And so I forgot who was it. Was it Waddle? It might have been Waddle. But that being said, Bradbury is covering, and he does a little hook route. This was 8 minutes to the game, I believe. He does a little hook route, and Bradbury reaches out and actually grabs the face mask of this Dolphins player and pulls it as the pass is thrown in this direction. So he pulls his face mask. The ref, as you could see in the back with his nice little, his nice black and white shoe in the background, is watching this. And he pulls the guy's face mask, not called at all, right? So that's another misblown penalty that would have added a face mask penalty and marched the Dolphins. And it would have changed, yet again, it could have changed the outcome, or at least kind of how in Madden it kind of changes the sort
Momentum.
of momentum. So that would have changed it. Now, at the end of the game, which I found really discouraging, was that at the end of the game, I was looking at the penalties, right? And I was like, okay, maybe it was a fair game. This was penalties. The left side is the Eagles. So 10 penalties resulting in 70 yards deficit, meaning the Eagles got 70 yards due to 10 penalties. On the right side, however, there is 0 penalties that was thrown throughout the whole entire game for the Eagles. So no offensive holding, no pass interference, no nothing. It's like a clean sweep. There's nothing, which, don't get me wrong, it is very, very difficult for one team to have 0 penalties through one game because there's so much happening. Normally, there's a few penalties on both sides, if not more. But for 0 and in the Eagles stadium, I'm not sure from me, but that seems one-sided. It could have, that 70 yards did change the momentum, so they got pushed back. But looking back at it, something's fishy. Why didn't the refs call any sort of penalties on the Eagles? And why didn't they do that throughout the whole entire game, not call one at all? So, yes, I know at the beginning of the first quarter, there was the, what did you call it, Chris? It was, it canceled each other out.
Yes, the penalties offset. The very that was the one that Philadelphia got, but it didn't count.
Correct. Now, so technically it'll be 1-0. So
yeah.
I don't know. It could have changed the momentum. I think at the end it should have been a PI called. That would change the little outcome. Yes, they were down by 2 scores on the fourth quarter, near the fourth quarter, but the momentum could have changed for the Dolphins. Don't get me wrong. Especially early in the game when they missed a face mask, which resulted, I believe, in just a field goal, if not kicking it. So that's something that I feel like it's one-sided. The Dolphins, yet again, they underperformed. They did not perform well. Tyreek should have caught that ball, which should have been a touchdown, which he decided not to. So there were a lot of things that were missing. And at least with the Colts and Browns, they actually call penalties compared to
I was about
to
say that. Yeah.
the Eagles had 0 on them. And yes, Eagles fans, one can say, well, we're perfect and everything, but in this sort of world, especially for this season, in the past, I don't know how long it's been since one team has only been called for penalties and the other team hasn't. That's just weird, especially if you follow basketball. Normally refs try to even them out so that it seems to be fair, so it won't be one-sided, but this seemed to be way one-sided. So what do y'all think?
Can you go back to the first picture of the first penalty? And I know that this picture is just terrible because hashtag NFL quality. But when I see this play, the first thing I think of, when people just run just straight, they just run straight down the field. They're trying to just do a Hail Mary or whatever, right? They almost always call the penalty on the defender if the defender jumps up over the receiver and is like behind, like closer to the offense, and the receiver is closer to the end zone. Almost always they will call that penalty simply because the defender doesn't turn around. So that was my first thought when I saw this picture. I know that this route is not the exact same as that, and maybe that impacted it. I don't know. But the fact that he's literally not turned around at all and that he has one arm in between the hands of the Dolphins receiver is pretty incriminating, I think. I mean, what do you think, Wiles?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I was watching this with a few of the boys here, and it was fun. We had 2 Eagles fans and 1 Dolphins fan.
Oh wow,
and
that is fun.
it was pretty fun. Let me say, yeah, it's kind of weird that that Philadelphia got no penalties on them. I mean, okay, let's also bring this up. There was one that the refs missed that ended up helping Phil or Miami, because then Jalen Hurts threw a pick six. Like, we will acknowledge that. We know that one was, but it was missed. But it did end, that was the one that ended up better for Miami. I do think at times, like some of the holding was because, just to be real, Miami's offensive line was not ready for Phillies. I mean, Hassan Reddick was just getting to Tua and just causing so much havoc. And that whole D line is some of the best in the NFL. So I will say that we know that that was a factor. We're not ignoring that Miami, we're not saying that Miami did nothing wrong, but like, yeah, 9 penalties to 0 is, I mean, they say in the NFL that holding or whatever always happens like on every play. So I don't know, man. And like, I don't know. I feel like the reffing, I think it just impacted Miami mentally as well. I think they just felt like, we're not playing well. We're in Philadelphia, one of the toughest places to play, and the refs are not on our side. Just kind of one of those games where everything was going wrong.
Right.
But I have to say this because I have to know. Chris, you had a take about Mr. Jalen Hurts here. I know that's not the theme of the episode, but I think we should let that be known to the world here.
Oh, that Jalen Hurts is being bailed out by his defense. Oh yeah, no. Like, if y'all didn't watch, and I know Eagles fans are like, "Oh well, Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback in the world." No, homeboy literally threw it to a defensive end. There was no one else around. Like, he literally just like, hey, and I understand, like, oh well, they missed a call and stuff like that. But and maybe Jalen Hurts felt bad. I don't know, but I mean, I understand when, as a Panther, like, Bryce Young tried to throw it to his tight end. Maybe he was trying to do that, but yet again, his defense has to bail him out. On this is, it's just like, what? So that being said, I personally think the reason why the Eagles are doing so well is because Jalen Hurts, he gets his points, but then he stops scoring. And then they decide, let's just run the ball. They stop scoring, and then the defense has to come on and save his butt. So that being said,
let me counter that though. Is them only starting to run the ball once they get a lead, is that Jalen Hurts' fault? No. That's the play calling's fault. Like, if they want to win games, they should keep their foot on the gas pedal. You can't take your foot off the gas pedal and then expect the other team to not score when they have their foot on the gas pedal. So I will agree, Jalen Hurts has been underperforming this year. I mean, I don't think you're going to find anyone that's going to say he's playing as good as he was last year, because statistically, he just isn't. But I don't know if you can blame the defense having to bail him out because his head coach stops calling aggressive plays. I don't know if I can buy into that.
Well, I don't know if they stopped calling aggressive plays, because if you look at the Jets game, Hurts was throwing it deep. But what did he have? He had 4 turnovers. I don't know.
It's true.
I don't know if I'm quite on the side yet that he's being hard carried by his defense, but I do see where he has some bad halves. I mean, he'll have amazing halves where they run up the score, they go way up, and then all of a sudden he just kind of stops looking. Sometimes, like in that first half or whatever, he'll look like a top 5 QB. But then randomly, he'll just have a significant dip in quality of play. And I mean, I know that happens to a lot of players are hot and cold. And I mean, I think he's still a good QB, but I mean, to be real with you, especially, I mean, I hate to harp on it again, but that Jets game was really bad. And that was not against a very good team, in my opinion. I mean, they're decent, and somehow they're fighting. So, I mean, props to them. I know they have a good defense, but like some of the things he was doing, you just look at it and you're like, what is he doing? That was really dumb. And then even against against the Dolphins. Like, he wasn't lighting it up, and he threw a pick six. Some will say he's injured. I know there are those talkers. So, Chris, what do you think of people saying, "Oh, he's injured"? Which, I mean, yes, he was
Oh,
like wearing
Jalen Hurts.
something. Yeah.
Uh if he's injured, then Aaron Rodgers is retired because goodness, like I don't think y'all can make the exception like, oh well, he's injured, so that's why he's underperforming. Well, the thing is, he has 3 wide receivers. He also has a very good running back, but whenever he performs or he tries, he forces. So there are times when AJ Brown bails him out. There are times with Devontae Smith. Well, I will say there are times when he doesn't play really well either. It does not bail him out. But I will say Jalen Hurts, there are times when it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You have to be smart. And looking how he played in the Super Bowl, like he was amazing, great. He knew where to throw it, how to hit it. The timing was great. And also thought was maybe his offensive coordinator was a bit better so that he was like, snap it. And so
Yep.
I understand
Yep.
both offensive and defensive coordinators are
Oh,
gone.
wow.
So that's
Yep.
why maybe he's adjusting to that. And maybe he's trying to learn the different routes and different snaps. So that could be impacting his sort of, okay, there's the bailout's gone. I have to throw it somewhere else. I have to force it to AJ. And maybe that could be the offensive coordinator say, if you have to get bailed out, throw it here and try to sneak it in, and don't worry about it. So
Can I have an aside for the comment of his coordinator being gone?
Yeah.
Just briefly. His coordinator was Shane Steichen, who is now the head coach of the Colts. Connecting those two back together, there have been, statistics get tracked throughout the year for everything. Did you know that the Colts are the 6th highest scoring offense in the league through the first, we're through 6-7 games, however many. The Colts are playing with a backup quarterback. The Colts dropped 38 points on arguably the best defense in the league with a backup. So I think that is a big contributor to Hurts, but I don't think you can pin all of the blame on that necessarily. But the Colts are the only team left in the entire league that have scored 20 plus points in a game. And they're not even playing with Anthony Richardson for most of these games, nor were they playing with Jonathan Taylor for half of the season so far. So I think that does have a big impact on Hurts, but I do agree. I mean, I think he is forcing it more this year. He's trying to do too much. And I think you're seeing that with other quarterbacks too. I mean, look at Mahomes. Mahomes is doing the same thing. I know if you look at Mahomes' numbers, they still look pretty good. But if you watch him during the game, he's doing the exact same thing. So it just kind of makes you wonder, like, because Mahomes lost Bieniemy, right? And Bieniemy was known to be one of the best offensive coordinators in the league too. So it just kind of makes you wonder how big of an impact those guys really have on these superstar players. Because if that's a contributing factor, I mean, you can point to that as to why they're underperforming. But all that to say, I mean, I do think that Jalen Hurts needs to pull himself together. Like, if he wants to make this team an NFC contender for the Super Bowl, like, he has to pull it together. Like, he can't keep doing this. He can't keep throwing things, whatever. He can't keep getting bailed out by his defense, regardless of how good his defense is, because his defense is very good. And honestly, that defense would probably bail most everyone out, if we're being honest, at least sometimes. But he's got to stop doing this. And even with these penalties, I mean, why is he throwing the ball into this double coverage to begin with? Like, I get he's really good. Like, and I get he could probably make it. But why risk it? I mean, you're a runner, just like run for the first down. Like, I didn't see the play again because I was asleep. So I'm saying all of this as an outside perspective, just like Preston was saying for the Colts game. But it just makes you wonder why he even threw that ball. And then the other one, the face mask. I mean, you can't put that on Jalen Hurts. How you miss that when you're literally standing right in front of the ref is beyond me. That honestly might be worse than the uncatchable ball.
That was
that was pretty bad. That was pretty
very
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I was just listening to, like, today. Cam Newton had Darius Slay on one of his recent episodes of his, like, podcast, and It's so funny. Darius Slay was talking about how Philly fans, man, they just like you can be so good and have one bad game, and then when you're being introduced in the starting lineups, they will boo you. Like you will get booed there. So you know what's funny, Chris? I actually think there's probably a decent amount of Philly fans, as much as they love Jalen Hurts, that are like, yeah, he needs to do better. He's getting carried. Like
Boo.
of the one city you can criticize their QB and they're kind of like kind of okay with it. It might be Philadelphia.
That
Honestly,
is true, but
it-
it was a
it-
crazy game.
It could just be Philly, but to me, I don't know. I know people, and I've talked to a few others, are like, oh, Cowboys fans are worse and stuff like that. But Philly, like, I hate to say this, but like,
Oh no.
y'all are like the rudest fans ever. And I'm like, and I hate to say that, but like, I've never seen so many negative, like, demeaning ways towards other fans. Like, because I've recently, I was just like looking, I was like, we know how bad is it? And I look up Philly, and I looked up one video just popped up, and I was like, really? Like and this is the time when Vikings versus Eagles. There was a time that there was a fan just video recording and was walking up to go to their
I've seen
seat.
that video. Yep.
Yep. And they were just getting harassed.
Yep.
And I'm like, you don't have even the ability to just suck it up and have good sportsmanship, but you have to defeat a team that you know is not good, but you're going to rub it in their face no matter what. And I hate to say that, but like that's just y'all can do better. Like this is just sad, especially when literally if you win the Super Bowl, your city's burning. I hate to say that, but
They
your
did burn
city is
down their
burning.
city.
And then when it's not winning, you burn down the city. Like, I hate to say that, but like, why? Why do you even? And one might say, oh well, it's Philly, and it's just the people. And I was like, it is literally the
I don't
fans that are
agree.
doing afterwards.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I have never heard horrible, terrible things, at least as horrible, said about Philadelphia Phillies fans. I mean, their stadium is what? It's in the same city as the Eagles. I mean, I know that, a lot of those fans are probably Philadelphia Phillies fans, but the Philadelphia Phillies are known to have one of the most passionate, loud fan bases in all of professional baseball. And you don't see Philadelphia Philly fans getting dragged through the mud like Eagles. So maybe it's just an Eagles thing. I don't know.
Maybe so.
I will say, if I'm wrong about this, is about to be awkward, but I think the Phillies did arrest a 9-year-old for getting a ball. So
I cannot confirm nor deny that just because I'm not informed. But
so as context, this is what I heard is that during a Phillies game, back before you were allowed to keep baseballs, a kid got a baseball like that was hit out, and he kept it, and they put the kid in custody. And then everyone got really upset about it and said, we shouldn't be putting a 9-year-old in custody for keeping a baseball. So now you are allowed to keep baseballs. And apparently they did let the kid out, I think like by the next day or the night. But still, the Phillies did arrest a 9-year-old for keeping a baseball. So
that's fair. And I will preface, the Phillies just lost the NLCS. So I would not want to be around any Phillies fans right now necessarily. But I'm just saying, I haven't heard the same slander about Phillies fans as I have about Eagles fans. But all of that to say, I mean, the officiating this week was just terrible. I'm sure that there are other egregious calls from other games we didn't even get into that we just may not even know about or have time. But do you guys have any concluding thoughts about the Eagles and the Browns and the Zebras?
I mistake. It was an 11-year-old. My bad.
Oh,
how dare you?
That makes a difference.
Anyway, that's my last statement.
Get better. I'm just saying. And Philly fans, just be respectful.
Well, all that to say,
Thanks for listening, guys. And sorry if you're a Philadelphia Eagles or Phillies fan, but you should still tune back in next week for more content. We might not roast you next week. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at LaunchCodesFB and on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at LaunchCodesFootball. I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Chris W.
And I'm Chris P.
And we will see you next week. Later.
See ya.